I'm Catherine, 22 female. I live alone in a small but tidy apartment near my university campus, a place that has been my sanctuary for the past 4 years. I just graduated with a degree in data science and landed a great job as a data analyst, something I worked incredibly hard for. My life is all about finding patterns in the noise, seeking logic in chaos, a skill that I would soon have to apply to my own family. They say blood is thicker than water, but they don't tell you what to do when that blood feels diluted by years of neglect. My family chose a luxury ski vacation over my college graduation, the single most important milestone of my life so far. But the real story started when they came back and began calling me relentlessly, demanding I give my brother $4,800 for a reason that would unravel his perfect future and expose the rotten core of my family's values. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. In my family, there were two roles, assigned from birth and never subject to change. My younger brother, Ethan, was the golden child. I was the ghost. It wasn't a role I chose, but one I was slowly pushed into until it became my defining characteristic within the four walls of our family home. Ethan, only 2 years my junior, was the sun around which my parents, Margaret and Richard, orbited. He was charming, athletic, and studying business at a prestigious university, the same one I was about to graduate from, though you'd never know it from the way my parents talked. His accomplishments were broadcasted on social media, announced at family gatherings, and discussed with reverent whispers. His minor successes were treated like national holidays. My achievements, on the other hand, were met with a polite nod and a swift change of subject. Graduating high school with top honors? That's nice, dear. Ethan just made the varsity soccer team. Earning a full-ride academic scholarship to university, saving them tens of thousands of dollars. Oh, wonderful. That will free up some funds for Ethan's debate club trips. It was a slow, quiet erosion of my presence. I learned to stop sharing my good news because the lukewarm response was more painful than no response at all. I became a ghost in my own home, a self-sufficient, low-maintenance daughter who never asked for anything and therefore was assumed to need nothing. My mother, Margaret, owned a high-end fashion boutique. Her life was curated for public consumption, a series of perfect snapshots of a perfect family. A daughter who was too academic, too quiet, didn't fit her brand. Ethan, with his easy smile and country club charm, was her greatest accessory. My father, Richard, was a financial advisor who ironically made the worst emotional investments imaginable. He followed my mother's lead in all things related to family dynamics, pouring all his attention and resources into Ethan, the blue-chip stock, while I was the municipal bond, stable, reliable, but utterly unexciting. They weren't cruel in an overt way. It was a neglect born of indifference. They provided for my basic needs, paid for my housing until my scholarship kicked in, but they never provided the one thing I craved, acknowledgement. They never saw me. This dynamic was never more apparent than in the months leading up to my graduation. I was finishing my data science degree with honors, a notoriously difficult program. I had spent countless nights fueled by coffee and sheer determination, coding until my eyes blurred, driven by the desire to build a life for myself where I wouldn't be invisible. Graduation wasn't just a ceremony for me, it was the finish line of a marathon I had run entirely on my own. It was proof that I existed, that I had achieved something significant. I sent them the date and details 3 months in advance. I reminded them again 2 months out. I even sent a follow-up email a month before with links for parking and seating. The initial response from my mother was a breezy text. "Got it, sweetie. So exciting." My dad just replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I allowed a small, fragile seed of hope to plant itself in my heart. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe seeing me in a cap and gown, walking across that stage, would finally make them see me. About 3 weeks before the big day, I called them, my voice buzzing with a nervous energy I hadn't felt in years. "Hey, just wanted to check in about graduation," I started. "I can get up to 4 tickets, So you, Dad, and Ethan can come, and maybe Grandma. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother's voice, laced with an unfamiliar, almost guilty hesitation. "Oh, Catherine, about that, something has come up." I felt my stomach clench. "Something?" I asked, my voice small. "Yes," she said, her tone brightening unnatural. "Why, your father's firm is rewarding the top advisors with a trip, and he won. A fantastic, all-expenses-paid ski trip to Aspen. It's the very same weekend as your graduation. Isn't that wonderful for your father?" I could hear the falseness in her cheer. It was a performance. "The same weekend?" I repeated, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "The exact same weekend," she confirmed. "It's just terrible timing, but we can't possibly ask him to turn down such a prestigious award. And Ethan is so excited, he's never been skiing in Aspen." My mind reeled. An award trip. It sounded plausible, I suppose, but my father had never mentioned any such contest. And why would Ethan be going on a corporate award trip? "So, you're not coming?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We can't, sweetie." "It's impossible," she said, her voice dripping with counterfeit sympathy. "We will be thinking of you, though, and we'll have a big dinner to celebrate when we get back. We'll make it up to you, I promise." A promise from my mother was like a check written on an account with no funds. It was worthless. I didn't argue, I didn't plead. What was the point? The ghost had no voice. I just said, "Okay, I understand." But I didn't understand how a family could so easily dismiss such a monumental moment. A ski trip over their daughter's graduation. It wasn't just a scheduling conflict, it was a statement of priorities. It was the ultimate confirmation of my place in the family hierarchy, dead last. After I hung up the phone, I sat in the silent darkness of my apartment, the seed of hope in my chest withering and dying, replaced by a cold, hard stone of resignation. The only person who seemed to care was my best friend, Sophia. When I told her, her reaction was immediate and fierce. "Are you kidding me, Catherine? A ski trip? That is the most pathetic, transparent excuse I have ever heard." Sophia was a law student, and her mind was a steel trap for injustice. She saw the world in terms of right and wrong, and this was, in her eyes, a criminal offense. "They're awful. I'm so sorry," she said, her voice softening. "But I'll be there. I'll be in the front row, and I will scream louder than anyone else when they call your name." And just like that, I had one person in my corner. At the time, I thought that was all I would need. I had no idea that this ski trip was just the opening act for a drama of deceit and entitlement that would push me from being a ghost to being an avenger. The day of my graduation arrived under a brilliant, cloudless sky. It was the kind of perfect, picturesque day that felt like a cruel joke. The world was celebrating, even if my family wasn't. I woke up feeling a hollow ache in my chest, a phantom limb where a sense of family pride should have been. I put on my dress, zipped up my graduation gown, and adjusted the cap on my head, my reflection in the mirror showing a stranger with sad, tired eyes. This was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, a culmination of 4 years of relentless effort. Instead, it felt like a final exam in loneliness, and I was passing with flying colors. Sophia arrived at my apartment with a bright smile and a bouquet of sunflowers. "You look amazing," she said, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to my own muted feelings. "Ready to go be brilliant?" I forced a smile. "As I'll ever be." She was true to her word. During the ceremony, as I sat amongst hundreds of my peers, all surrounded by their beaming families, I felt a profound sense of isolation. I scanned the massive crowd, knowing I wouldn't find a single familiar face from my own bloodline. There were no parents holding oversized cameras, no embarrassing banners with my name on them, no younger brother looking bored but proud. There was just an empty space where my family should have been. When they finally called my name, "Catherine, summa cum laude," a roar erupted from a small section of the audience. It was Sophia, standing on her chair, cheering and yelling my name at the top of her lungs. I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, tear-filled laugh. As I walked across the stage to shake the dean's hand, that one voice, full of genuine pride and love, was enough to carry me through the moment. It was a lifeline in an ocean of indifference. She was my family today. After the ceremony, we took pictures by the campus landmarks. Sophia made me pose with my diploma, throwing my cap in the air, creating the memories my parents had outsourced to her. "Okay, now let's check your phone," she said as we walked to a nearby cafe to celebrate. "Maybe they sent a nice text or something." I pulled out my phone with a sense of dread. I hadn't looked at it all day, wanting to avoid the inevitable disappointment. There were a few congratulatory texts from extended family and friends, but from my core family unit, there was nothing. No calls, no texts, not even a generic congrats. My heart, which had been tentat, Ively lifted by Sophia's joy, sank back into that familiar, heavy place. They hadn't just missed the ceremony, they had forgotten I existed for the entire day. "Nothing?" Sophia asked, her face etched with disbelief and anger. I just shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Okay, that's it," she declared, her lawyer-in-training indignation firing up. "They have officially crossed the line from neglectful to monstrous. We are having the best celebratory lunch ever, and we are not giving them another second of our thoughts today." We ordered champagne and expensive appetizers, and for a few hours, I managed to push the hurt away. Sophia was a master at distraction, telling me stories about her law school professors and making me laugh until my sides hurt. By the time I got back to my apartment that evening, I was emotionally exhausted, but clinging to the warmth of her friendship. I kicked off my heels and fell onto my couch, the silence of my apartment amplifying the emptiness I felt. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced at it and saw a single new notification, one new voicemail. It was from my father. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me, a flicker of hope that it might be an apology, quickly extinguished by the cynical reality of our relationship. With trembling fingers, I played the message. The first thing I heard wasn't his voice, but the sound of wind and distant, cheerful music. It was a pocket dial. He was clearly on the ski slopes. I could hear the rhythmic swoosh of skis on snow and the muffled chatter of people around him. I was about to hang up when I heard my mother's voice, startlingly clear. "Richard, did you remember to call Catherine?" she asked, her tone light and carefree. "It's her graduation today." "Oh, right," my father's voice replied, sounding distant and distracted. "I'll shoot her a text later. Did Ethan make it down the Black Diamond run yet?" My mother laughed, a sound that was bright and utterly untroubled. "He did. He's a natural, of course. He's already talking about joining the ski club at school. We'll have to get him all new gear for that." Then Ethan's voice cut in, breathless and excited. "Mom, Dad, you have to see this. The instructor said I have perfect form. Can we go again tomorrow before we fly out?" "Of course, sweetie," my mother cooed. "Whatever you want." The voicemail was about 30 seconds long. 30 seconds of my family having the time of their lives without a single thought for me. My father's promise to shoot her a text later was the final, crushing blow. It wasn't that he forgot, it was that I was an afterthought, a task on a to-do list he'd get to eventually. Maybe. The graduation I had spent 4 years working towards was less important than my brother's perfect form on a ski slope. I listened to the message again and then a third time. The casual, dismissive tone, the easy laughter, the effortless way they prioritized Ethan's fleeting fun over my lifetime achievement, it was all there. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a simple mistake. This was who they were. The voicemail wasn't an accident, it was a revelation. It was the unvarnished truth of my place in their world. I saved the recording. I didn't know why at the time, but some instinct told me to keep it. It felt like evidence. As I sat there in my graduation dress, the silence of my apartment now a roaring testament to their absence, the sadness inside me began to curdle. It slowly, surely, hardened into something else. It was a cold, quiet anger. The ghost was starting to feel a flicker of fire. They had made their choice. They had decided who mattered. And in that moment, listening to the sounds of their perfect family vacation, I started to make a choice of my own. The week after graduation was a blur of setting up my new life. I signed the lease on a new apartment closer to my job, packed up the life I had built as a student, and focused on the future. I didn't hear a word from my family. The promised, celebratory dinner never materialized. They returned from Aspen, and their lives simply continued, with my graduation becoming a non-event they had successfully bypassed. I saw photos on social media. the three of them, beaming in their expensive ski gear, posing against a backdrop of snow-capped mountains. The caption my mother wrote was, "An incredible, well-deserved trip for my two favorite men, family first blessed." The irony was so bitter it made my teeth ache. I started my new job as a data analyst. It was everything I had hoped for: challenging, engaging, and full of brilliant, supportive people. For the first time, I felt seen and valued for my skills. My work was meticulous, my reports were insightful, and my boss was impressed. I was building a world for myself where my worth wasn't determined by my parents' fleeting attention. I was healing, piece by proving to myself that I didn't need their validation to succeed. The LD anger I felt on graduation night had subsided into a steely resolve. I decided to go low contact. I wouldn't call, I wouldn't text, and I would let them make the first move if they ever chose to. 2 weeks went by in blissful silence. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again, and again, and again. By the time I got to my lunch break, I had 17 missed calls from my mother and 6 from my father. The sheer volume was alarming. My family never called me this much unless it was a dire emergency, and even then, it was usually a single, perfunctory call. This was a barrage. My first thought was that something terrible had happened to Ethan. Despite everything, a knot of worry tightened in my stomach. I finally answered on the 18th call. "Catherine, finally!" My mother's voice was sharp, frantic, and laced with an accusation, as if my not answering was a personal affront. "Why haven't you been picking up your phone? We've been trying to reach you all morning." "I'm at work, Mom," I said, my tone flat and professional. "I just started a new job, remember?" "Oh, right," she said dismissively, the topic of my career clearly uninteresting to her. "Listen, we need to talk to you. It's about Ethan." The knot in my stomach tightened. "Is he okay?" He's fine," she said impatiently. "Well, not fine, but he's not hurt. It's a financial thing. It's very serious, Catherine." I waited, saying nothing. "He has this incredible opportunity," she began, her voice shifting into its familiar sales pitch mode. "It's a networking trip to London with his university's prestigious future leaders in business society. They're meeting with executives from top international firms. It's a once-in-a-lifetime chance that could set him up for his entire career." I could already see where this was going. "Okay," I said slowly. "The thing is," she continued, her voice dropping conspiratorially, "it's quite expensive. And with the property taxes on the house and my boutique's seasonal slump, your father and I are a bit stretched thin this month." "How expensive?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. She took a deep breath. "The total cost for the trip, flights, hotel, program fees, it comes to $4,800. It's due this Friday." The silence stretched for a long, heavy moment. I processed the number. $4,800. A huge sum of money. A sum of money they expected me to have. "And you're telling me this because—" I prompted, though I knew the answer. "Well, we need you to help," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Your father and I were thinking, since you got that scholarship and didn't have any student loans, and you just started this new job, you must have some savings. We need you to lend Ethan the money." It wasn't a request. It was a demand. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They skipped my graduation for a luxury vacation, ignored me for weeks, and their first real contact was to ask me, the daughter they consistently overlooked, to finance the ambitions of their golden child. "You want me to give Ethan $4,800. I clarified, wanting to hear her say the words again. "Yes," she said, her voice strained with impatience. "It's for his future, Catherine. This is what families do. We support each other. He'll pay you back, of course. Someday." "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it felt like a thunderclap in the conversation. What did you say?" she stammered, genuinely shocked. "I said no," I repeated, my voice firmer this time. "I will not be giving Ethan $4,800. My mother was silent for a moment, and then her tone shifted from frantic to furious. I don't think you understand, Catherine. This isn't optional. Your brother's future is on the line. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I cut her off, the steely resolve in my chest melting away to reveal the molten anger beneath. You didn't even come to my graduation. You went skiing. You didn't even call. Now you're calling to demand I fund his future leader's trip? The answer is no. How dare you bring that up? She shrieked. That was a work obligation for your father. You are being incredibly selfish and ungrateful. This is about your brother. It's always about my brother, I said, my voice dangerously calm. And I'm done paying for it. My savings are for my future, the one I built myself without any of your help. I'm not giving him a cent. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was hammering against my ribs. But underneath the adrenaline, there was a feeling of profound, liberating power. I had said no. I had finally broken the pattern. My phone immediately started ringing again, my father this time, then Ethan. Over the next 2 days, the calls were relentless. I counted 37 missed calls in total, interspersed with a barrage of texts that grew increasingly hostile. They ranged from my father's disappointed guilt trips, "We are so disappointed in your attitude, Catherine," to Ethan's entitled whining, "I can't believe you're so jealous you'd ruin my career," to my mother's outright threats, "If you don't do this, you will regret it. You are tearing this family apart." They were trying to bulldoze me into submission, using the same tactics of guilt and pressure that had worked for 22 years. But something in me had fundamentally changed. I was no longer the ghost, silently accepting my fate. They had shown me my worth, and now I was showing them my boundaries. But as the pressure mounted, a question began to form in my analytical mind. Why were they so desperate? A networking trip, while valuable, didn't seem like a life-or-death situation. Something about the intensity of their demand felt off. The number, $4,800, felt oddly specific. My data analyst brain kicked in. There was a missing variable in this equation, a piece of the puzzle I couldn't see. And I was suddenly determined to find it. The relentless barrage of calls and texts finally stopped on Thursday afternoon, the day before the supposed deadline for Ethan's trip money. The silence was more unnerving than the noise. It felt like the calm before a storm. My family wasn't the type to give up. They were the type to regroup and find a new angle of attack. This sudden radio silence meant something had shifted, and my gut told me it wasn't in my favor. That evening, I met Sophia for dinner. My hands were still trembling slightly from the emotional onslaught of the past 48 hours. I laid out the whole story for her. The 37 calls, the demand for $4,800, and my unwavering refusal. "Good for you," Sophia said, her eyes flashing with pride. "Seriously, Catherine, that took guts." It felt terrifying, I admitted, but also necessary. The weirdest part is how desperate they are. It feels like more than just a trip. Why would they go to these lengths? Because they're entitled narcissists, she offered, taking a sip of her wine. That's the simple answer, I said, swirling the ice in my water glass. But I'm a data analyst, Soph. I look for patterns. This is an outlier. Their behavior is extreme, even for them. And that number, $4,800, it's so specific. Sophia leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "You think there's more to it?" It wasn't a question. "I do," I confirmed. "I feel like I'm only seeing one column of a spreadsheet, and I need to see the whole dataset to understand the picture." "So, what's your plan?" she asked. "Are you going to be a ghost, or are you going to be a detective?" A small smile touched my lips. "I think it's time for the ghost to do some haunting." My investigation began that night. My parents had always been careless with their digital privacy, assuming no one, least of all their meek older daughter, would ever have a reason to look. I started with the university's website, looking up the future leaders in business society. It existed, and they did have an annual networking trip to London. I dug into the details. The trip was highly publicized, a jewel in the business school's crown. I found the page with the cost breakdown. The total for the week-long trip, including flights, accommodations, and program fees, was listed right there in black and white. $3,500. My breath hitched. Not $4,800. It was $1,300 less than what my family was demanding. My heart started to beat faster. This was it. This was the discrepancy, the missing variable I had been looking for. Why were they trying to get an extra $1,300 from me? Where was that money supposed to go? My mind raced through possibilities. Were they padding the cost to pay for something else? Was Ethan trying to scam them, and they were passing the scam on to me? I needed more information. I turned my attention to Ethan. He was a prolific social media user, constantly posting about his amazing university life. I scrolled through his profiles, which were a carefully curated highlight reel of parties, study groups in sun-drenched libraries, and photos with people who looked important. As I went back several weeks, before the ski trip, I noticed a change in the tone of his posts. There were fewer group photos and more vague, philosophical posts about overcoming challenges and learning from mistakes. It was classic performative introspection, but it was out of character for him. Then I found it, a post from about 2 months ago. It was a picture of him and a group of friends all dressed up at what looked like a high-stakes poker night. The caption was arrogant, all in, high risk, high reward. One of his friends had commented, "Hope you won back what you lost to Alex last week, man." Ethan's reply was deleted, but the friend's comment was still there. Alex, I knew that name. Alex was notorious on campus for owning high-stakes games and being an unforgiving creditor. A cold dread washed over me as the pieces began to click into place. Ethan wasn't just a social butterfly, he had a gambling problem, a serious one. My next step was more invasive, but I felt no guilt. I logged into the shared family phone plan account online. It was something my father had set up years ago, and my line was still on it out of convenience. I had the password saved from when I had to check data usage in college. I navigated to Ethan's call and text history. I wasn't looking for conversations, just patterns. I exported the data logs for the last 3 months into a spreadsheet. The data analyst in me took over, and the emotional turmoil was replaced by a cold, clear focus. I sorted the data, filtering for recurring numbers that weren't in his contact list. One number stood out. It had called him over 50 times in the past month, often late at night. The texts from this number were even more frequent. I did a quick online search of the number. It was linked to a burner phone, but in a student forum discussion about off-campus housing, someone had mentioned the number belonged to Alex, the same Alex from the poker game. The puzzle was nearly complete. Ethan had a significant gambling debt. He likely lost a huge amount of money to Alex and was now under pressure to pay it back. The story about the London trip was the perfect cover. It was a real event, which made it believable, but he had inflated the cost to cover his debt. He had conned our parents, and now they were trying to con me. The $3,500 was for the trip that would maintain his golden boy image, and the extra $1,300 was the first installment to pay off his gambling shark. And what about the remaining debt? The full amount he owed was likely much more. I realized the $4,800 was probably just the most urgent part. But there was still one piece missing. How did this connect to the ski trip? I went to the university's academic calendar. I looked up the business school's scholarship and awards page. Ethan had been the recipient of the prestigious Dean's Leadership Scholarship for the past 2 years. It was a full-ride scholarship awarded to students who demonstrated outstanding academic performance and unimpeachable personal integrity. I clicked on the scholarship requirements. To maintain the scholarship, a student had to keep their GPA above a 3.7 and, more importantly, have no disciplinary infractions. Then I saw it. The deadline for the scholarship renewal application for the next academic year was this Friday, the same day the money for the London trip was due. Suddenly, a new, darker theory began to form. What if the London trip wasn't the primary goal? What if the $4,800 wasn't for a trip or a debt, but for something else entirely? What if Ethan's academic standing, the very foundation of his golden child status, was in jeopardy? The gambling was a symptom of a larger problem. He was desperate and reckless. What else was he capable of? I remembered my mother's frantic tone, my father's uncharacteristic pressure. This wasn't just about maintaining Ethan's social status. This was about preventing a catastrophe that could bring his entire curated future crashing down, and they were willing to sacrifice my financial security and my trust to stop it. I closed my laptop, the screen reflecting my own grim expression. My little digging expedition had uncovered a web of lies far more complex than I had imagined. And at the center of it was my brother, the son my family orbited, who it turned out was nothing more than a black hole, consuming everything around him. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place the next morning. It came not from a spreadsheet or a social media deep dive, but from an idle conversation I overheard at the coffee shop near my new office. Two students from my university were sitting at the table next to me, complaining loudly about their coursework. "I'm telling you, the plagiarism detection software for Dr. Albright's class is no joke," one of them said. "He caught like 5 people last semester. Kicked them right out of the business school." My blood ran cold. Dr. Albright? I knew that name. He was the head of the ethics committee for the business school and a notoriously strict professor. Ethan had mentioned being in his advanced corporate strategy class this semester. Suddenly, all the disparate data points converged into a single, terrifying narrative. Ethan wasn't just in gambling debt. He was desperate. He was taking a difficult class with a professor known for his rigid stance on academic integrity. He had a history of taking shortcuts. The scholarship renewal was due. The frantic, life-or-death pressure from my parents finally made sense. This wasn't about a networking trip or a gambling debt. Those were just symptoms. The core issue was that Ethan had been caught cheating. The $4,800 wasn't for a trip. It was the price of a cover-up. It was hush money, or perhaps the cost of a high-priced academic tutor or an essay writing service to fix a problem he couldn't handle himself. Or worse, it was to pay someone off. I immediately went back to my apartment my coffee forgot. I needed to confirm it. This was an explosive accusation, and I needed proof, not just a well-founded theory. Sophia, my ever-loyal legal counsel, was my first call. "I think Ethan got caught for plagiarism," I said, the words tumbling out of me. "And I think my parents are trying to get money from me to cover it up." "Whoa, Catherine, slow down," she said. "That's a massive leap. How could you possibly prove that?" "I don't know," I admitted, pacing my living room. "But it's the only theory that fits all the facts. The desperation, the specific amount of money, the scholarship deadline. It all points to an academic integrity violation." "Okay, let's think like a lawyer," she said, her voice calm and methodical. "What's the goal? Do you want to expose him, or do you just want them to leave you alone?" I stopped pacing. What did I want? A week ago, I just wanted to be left alone. I wanted to build my new life in peace. But now, after the lies, the manipulation, and the blatant disrespect, that wasn't enough. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the principle. My entire life, I had worked hard, followed the rules, and earned my success with integrity. I had built my future on a foundation of honesty. Ethan, meanwhile, had been handed everything, and when that wasn't enough, he cheated. And my parents, instead of holding him accountable, were enabling him. They were willing to sacrifice my financial stability to protect his fraudulent success. This was an injustice that I couldn't ignore. It was a rot that went to the very core of my family. "I want to expose him," I said, my voice filled with a conviction that surprised even me. "I want them to see that there are consequences. His entire future is built on a lie, and that lie is being funded by their neglect of me. It has to stop." "All right," Sophia said. "Then we need a plan. An accusation without irrefutable proof is just slander. We need something concrete." My mind went into overdrive. How do you prove academic dishonesty from the outside? I couldn't hack into the university's system. I couldn't confront his friends. I needed a different approach. I needed to use their own desperation against them. The plan began to form, elegant in its simplicity. It was a trap, and I was going to use the $4,800 as bait. I spent the next few hours crafting an email. It was addressed to my parents and Ethan. I read it over a dozen times, tweaking the language until it was perfect. It had to sound like a capitulation, but with a single, non-negotiable condition. It had to be a condition that they would be forced to accept if they were as desperate as I believed them to be. Finally, I hit send. The email read, "Subject regarding your request. Mom, Dad, Ethan. I have given your request a great deal of thought over the past couple of days. The pressure has been immense, and I admit I reacted poorly at first. I understand that family is supposed to support each other, and this is clearly very important for Ethan's future. Therefore, I have decided to give Ethan the $4,800. However, given the size of the amount and the sudden nature of the request, I have one condition for my own financial security. This is not negotiable. I need a clear, written explanation for what the money is for. Since it's for a university-sanctioned trip, I'll need a copy of the official program invoice or cost breakdown from the business school. Additionally, as this is a significant loan, I would like a brief letter of acknowledgement from Ethan's academic advisor or the program director, Dr. Albright, simply confirming his participation in the program. This is standard practice for securing a personal loan and something my financial advisor insists upon for any large transaction. Once I have those two documents, I will transfer the full amount immediately. You said the deadline is tomorrow, so I'm sure you can get these simple documents quickly. Sincerely, Catherine." It was a masterpiece of corporate speak and veiled threats. I had feigned surrender, offered them the money they so desperately needed, but tied it to a condition I knew they could not meet. If the money was truly for the London trip, providing an invoice and a confirmation letter would be trivial. But if it was for a cover-up of an academic scandal involving Dr. Albright, asking that very same professor for a letter of acknowledgement would be impossible. It was a checkmate. I was calling their bluff on a grand scale. Now, all I had to do was wait for their response. The ball was in their court. They could either admit the lie and walk away empty-handed, or they could double down and walk straight into the trap I had set. Knowing my family, I was betting on the latter. The ghost was no longer haunting. She was setting the board for a game they had no idea they were playing. And for the first time in my life, I held all the power. The response to my email came less than an hour later. It was a phone call from my father. His voice, usually so confident and dismissive, was strained. "Catherine," he began, "we received your email. Your mother and I, we appreciate you reconsidering." "It's a big decision," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "I had to think it through." Of course," he said quickly. "About your conditions. A letter from Dr. Albright might be difficult to get on such short notice. He's a very busy man." The excuse was so weak, so transparent that I almost laughed. "Dad," I said, my voice firm and businesslike, "you told me this was a life-changing opportunity for Ethan. If the university is promoting this trip, they should have the paperwork readily available. An invoice and a quick email from a professor should take 10 minutes. If it's as important as you say it is, I'm sure Ethan can manage that." I could hear my mother muttering in the background, her voice a furious, muffled hiss. My father cleared his throat. "The invoice is complicated. There are different payment portals." "Then send me the link and the login," I countered immediately. "I can pay the school directly. That would be even easier." Checkmate. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I had cornered them. By offering to pay the university directly, I had completely dismantled their cover story. If the money was for a trip, they would have jumped at the offer. Their silence was a confession. "Catherine, you are making this incredibly difficult," my father finally said, his voice dropping the pretense of politeness and hardening into frustration. "This is not how a daughter should treat her family. This is how a person with financial sense handles a $4,800 loan," I retorted. "The terms are simple. No documents, no money. The offer expires tomorrow at noon." I hung up, my heart racing. The trap had been sprung. Their silence for the rest of the evening confirmed my suspicions. They couldn't produce the documents because the documents didn't exist. The London trip was a lie. The next morning was Friday, the scholarship renewal deadline. At 11:00 a.m., an hour before my deadline, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Fine, you win. I don't need your stupid money." It was Ethan. His text was petulant and childish, but it was the white flag of surrender. They had failed to get the money. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. I had spent the previous evening preparing. I compiled everything I had: the saved voicemail from graduation day, the screenshots of Ethan's social media posts about gambling, the phone logs showing the calls from Alex, the university's official page for the London trip with the correct cost, and a printout of my carefully worded email and their subsequent silence. I put it all into a neat, professional-looking folder. It was a dossier of my family's deceit, compiled with the cold, impartial precision of a data analyst. My target was not Ethan directly. That would be a messy, personal confrontation. My target was the system that enabled him, the Dean's Leadership Scholarship, a scholarship predicated on unimpeachable personal integrity. At 2:00 p.m. that afternoon, I walked into the administration building of the university's business school. I had scheduled a meeting not with Dr. Albright, but with the head of the scholarship committee, a woman named Dean Miller. I had presented myself as a recent alumna wanting to discuss contributions to a new fund for ethical leadership. It was a pretext that got me in the door. Dean Miller was a sharp, intelligent woman in her late 50s. She greeted me warmly, congratulating me on my recent graduation and my new job. "So, Catherine," she said, smiling, "what can I do for you?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, Dean Miller," I began, my voice steady, "I'm here today under a slightly different pretense. I'm here because I have serious concerns about the integrity of one of your flagship scholarship programs." Her smile faltered. She leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "Please go on." I opened my folder and laid the documents on her desk one by one, calmly and methodically walking her through the narrative they created. I told her about my family's dynamic, the pressure, the demand for money under false pretenses. I didn't present it as a bitter daughter seeking revenge. I presented it as a concerned alumna and a data analyst who had uncovered a disturbing pattern of behavior in a recipient of a scholarship that was supposed to represent the best of the university. "The Dean's Leadership Scholarship is built on the principle of integrity," I said, my voice even. "I received a full scholarship for my own degree, and I know how life-changing that support can be. It should be reserved for students who have earned it, not just academically, but ethically." I showed her the cost discrepancy for the trip, the evidence of a significant gambling debt, and the extreme lengths my family had gone to in order to extract money from me for an unverified cause, all happening in the days leading up to the scholarship renewal deadline. "I don't know for certain what the money was for," I concluded, looking her directly in the eye. "But this pattern of behavior, the deceit, the desperation, is not in line with the values of a future leader. I believe this information warrants a thorough review of my brother, Ethan's, eligibility to continue representing this institution as a Dean's Scholar." Dean Miller was silent for a long time, her eyes scanning the documents on her desk. Her face was unreadable, a mask of professional neutrality, but I could see a flicker of deep concern in her eyes. She picked up the printout of the official trip costs, then looked at my email demanding documentation. She understood immediately. She recognized the pattern. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Catherine," she finally said, her voice grave. "You have given me a great deal to consider. We take the integrity of our scholarship recipients very seriously. I assure you, we will be conducting a full and immediate review of this matter." As I walked out of her office and back into the bright afternoon sun, I didn't feel a triumphant surge of victory. I felt a quiet, somber sense of closure. I had not acted out of spite. I had acted out of a need for justice. Ethan had made his choices. My parents had made theirs. They had built their family on a foundation of lies and favoritism. All I had done was hold up a mirror. The consequences were now in the hands of the very institution they had tried to manipulate. The confrontation hadn't been a shouting match in a living room. It had been a quiet, professional meeting where data spoke louder than anger. I had exposed my brother not by attacking him, but by defending the very principles of integrity he had so carelessly disregarded. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that his future, once so golden and assured, was about to be ruined. The fallout was not immediate, but when it came, it was catastrophic for my family. The university's review was, as Dean Miller had promised, full and immediate. An academic integrity investigation is a quiet, internal affair, but its consequences are earth-shattering. About a week after my meeting, I received a short, professional email from Dean Miller thanking me again for the information and stating that appropriate action had been taken in accordance with university policy. It was all she could legally say, but it was enough. The first real sign of the verdict came from Ethan. He called me from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but my curiosity got the better of me. His voice was unrecognizable, not the cocky, entitled tone I was used to, but a broken, desperate whisper. "You ruined my life," he hissed. "They took it all away. The scholarship is gone. They're opening a formal hearing for academic dishonesty. I might get expelled, all because you couldn't just give me the money." "The money was never the point, Ethan," I said calmly. "The point was the lies. You cheated. You lied to Mom and Dad, and you all tried to lie to me. This isn't my fault. This is the consequence of your actions." "You'll pay for this," he spat, before hanging up. There was no real threat in his voice, only the impotent rage of a boy who had never faced a consequence before and couldn't comprehend it. The next call was from my mother. It was a storm of tears, accusations, and theatrical wailing. She accused me of being a jealous, vengeful monster who had destroyed her son's future out of spite. "How could you do this to your own brother? To your family?" she sobbed. "What family?" I asked, my voice cold and devoid of the emotion she was trying to provoke. "The family that went skiing during my graduation. The family that ignored me for weeks and then demanded thousands of dollars based on a lie. That family stopped existing for me a long time ago." My father never called. His silence was, in its own way, the most damning confession of all. As a financial advisor, he understood the concept of a bad investment. He had poured everything into Ethan, and his prize stock had just crashed to zero. There was nothing left to say. I learned the full story in bits and pieces later on through the family grapevine. Ethan had indeed been caught plagiarizing a major paper in Dr. Albright's class. He had paid another student to write it for him, and the student had done a sloppy job, triggering the university's detection software. The $4,800 had been to pay the student to write a new paper from scratch and to keep quiet. When I refused to provide the funds, Ethan's desperate attempt to submit a revised paper failed, and the disciplinary process began. My information had simply accelerated and amplified the investigation, turning it from a simple plagiarism case into a full-blown ethics inquiry. The results were devastating for him. He lost the dean's scholarship immediately. The formal hearing found him guilty of a severe academic integrity breach. He wasn't expelled, but he was suspended for a full year and stripped of all academic honors. His perfect record was shattered, and the prestigious business school that had been his entire identity now viewed him as a pariah. The gambling debt, without the scholarship money to offset his expenses, became an anchor, pulling him and my parents down. My father had to cash out a portion of his retirement fund to pay off Alex and prevent the situation from escalating. My family, once the picture of curated suburban success, imploded. The financial strain, combined with the public shame of their golden child's downfall, created cracks in my parents' seemingly perfect marriage. My mother could no longer parade Ethan's accomplishments on social media. Her boutique sales suffered as her attention was consumed by the drama. They had to sell their large family home and downsize, a humiliating blow to their social standing. They had built their world on the unstable foundation of Ethan's fraudulent success, and when that collapsed, the whole structure came down with it. As for me, my life moved in the opposite direction. I excelled at my job. My ability to see patterns and tell stories with data earned me a promotion within my first year. I bought my own small condo in the city, filling it with light, plants, and the peace that comes from building a life on your own terms. I had my friends, my career, and a profound sense of self-respect I had never known before. Sophia finished law school and became a prosecutor, a fitting path for someone with such a strong moral compass. We remained inseparable, my chosen family. I never reconciled with my parents or Ethan. The chasm between us was too wide, filled with too many years of neglect and a final, unforgivable act of betrayal. Occasionally, I would get a tentative, guilt-laden text from my mother around holidays, but I never responded. Forgiveness was a currency they hadn't earned. I didn't revel in their misery. I took no joy in their downfall, but I felt a quiet, firm sense of justice. They had reaped what they had sown. My revenge wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, calculated, and absolute. It was the simple act of refusing to be the ghost in my own life story. I stopped being their invisible support structure and let them collapse under the weight of their own flawed values.